The massive doors of the Galactic Peacekeeping Station Harmony's edge slid open with a soft hiss. Staff Sergeant Kim Juno stepped through, his boots making quiet sounds on the metal floor. He carried a single bag over his shoulder and wore the standard human military uniform. His face showed no emotion as he walked down the long corridor. Around him, alien soldiers stopped their conversations to stare. Some pointed at him with clawed fingers. Others made clicking sounds that might have been laughter. Juno kept walking, his eyes straight ahead. He had seen this reaction many times before. The station was huge, bigger than any human city. Different species worked together here, keeping peace across the galaxy. Tall Zephyrians with crystal-like skin moved gracefully through the halls. Massive Kraxan warriors stomped past on 4 legs, their 4 arms swinging as they walked. Quick Valari scouts darted between other aliens, their long necks turning to look at everything. Juno found his way to the main briefing room. The doors opened and he walked inside. The room fell silent. Dozens of alien eyes turned to study him. Some aliens were twice his size. Others had claws that could cut through metal. A few had weapons built into their bodies. Commander Thexel stood at the front of the room. He was a Zephyrian, tall and thin, with skin that looked like blue crystal. His eyes glowed softly as he looked down at a small computer pad. He did not look happy. "Another human assignment?" Thexel muttered to the alien standing next to him. "Command thinks we need their help." The second alien, a female Zephyrian named Lixera, made a sound like breaking glass. It was laughter. What could humans possibly teach us about fighting? Around the room, other aliens began talking among themselves. Their voices mixed together in a strange chorus of clicks, growls, and musical sounds. Juno could understand most of what they said. Universal translators made sure everyone could communicate. "Humans are weak," said one Kraxan warrior. His name was Brextar and he was covered in old battle scars. "They break easily. They are slow too," added a Valari scout called Kilera. Her neck was twice as long as a human's and her eyes were large and yellow. "My people can run 3 times faster. And they live such short lives," said another alien. "How can they learn anything useful in such a brief time?" Juno remained standing by the door. He listened to their comments without changing expression. His dark eyes moved from one alien to another, studying them the way a soldier studies a battlefield. Commander Thexel cleared his throat. The room became quiet again. He looked at his computer pad and began reading aloud. Staff Sergeant Kim Juno. Human male. Age 38. Service record includes the defense of New Busan, the 3-month stand at Yongdiok Station, the siege of Incheon Base. As the commander read each battle name, more aliens began to laugh. The sounds they made were different for each species, but the meaning was clear. They thought these battles sounded made up. Defense of New Busan? Brextar's voice was like rocks grinding together. Humans love to make their small fights sound important. 3-month stand? Kilera's musical voice carried clear mockery. "I bet it lasted 3 hours at most." "Typical human stories," said another Kraxan. "They turn every little skirmish into a great legend." Commander Thexal continued reading. Survived 47 separate combat operations. Decorated for bravery under fire. Specialist in unconventional warfare and survival tactics. The laughter grew louder. Some aliens slapped their knees or clapped their various hands and claws together. A few made rude comments about human imagination. Finally, Commander Thexal looked up from his pad. His glowing eyes fixed on Juno. "Staff Sergeant, would you like to introduce yourself to your new unit?" Juno stepped forward. The room became quiet as he walked to the center. He was smaller than most of the aliens around him. His uniform was plain compared to their advanced armor and weapons. But something in the way he moved made a few of the aliens stop laughing. "Staff Sergeant Kim Juno," he said in a calm voice. 23 years active service. I am here to do my job." His words were simple and direct. No fancy speeches or boasts about his achievements. Just a statement of fact. Brextar leaned forward in his chair. "And what exactly do you think your job is, human?" Juno's eyes met the Kraxan warrior's gaze without fear. "To help keep the peace. To protect civilians. To complete missions that others cannot." "Cannot." Lixera's crystal skin flashed with amusement. "What makes you think humans can do things we cannot?" Juno was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Experience." This answer caused more laughter. The aliens looked at each other with expressions that clearly showed they thought the human was either very stupid or very arrogant. Commander Thexel raised a hand for silence. "Very well, Staff Sergeant. You will be assigned to Beta Squad. Training exercises begin tomorrow at 0800 station time. I hope you can keep up. As the meeting broke up, aliens filed out of the room. Many of them made comments as they passed Juno. Try not to get killed on your first day, human. Maybe you can tell us some of your war stories. We enjoy good fiction. I wonder how long this one will last. Juno stood alone in the empty briefing room. He looked around at the chairs where his new teammates had been sitting. Tomorrow he would have to prove himself to beings who thought humans were nothing more than weak storytellers. He picked up his bag and walked toward his assigned quarters. The corridor was quieter now, but he could still hear alien voices discussing the new human assignment. Most of the comments were not kind. Juno did not seem bothered by their doubt. He had faced similar attitudes before. Humans were often underestimated by other species. Sometimes that was an advantage. The training bay doors opened early the next morning. Juno walked in carrying only his standard equipment bag. The massive room was filled with obstacles, weapons, and training devices. His new squad mates were already waiting for him. Beta Squad consisted of 5 aliens, each from a different species. Brextar, the scarred Kraxan warrior, stood with his 4 massive arms crossed. His body was built like a tank, covered in natural armor plating. Next to him, Kilara stretched her long neck, her yellow eyes tracking Juno's movement. 2 other Kraxan warriors, Nexvor and Grimtal, flexed their claws impatiently. A second Valari scout named Silwyn practiced quick movements that were too fast for human eyes to follow. "Welcome to your first real test, human," Brextar announced. His voice echoed through the training bay. "We have designed something special just for you." Kilara's neck curved in what might have been a smile. "We want to see how well humans fight when they cannot rely on their stories and legends." The training scenario appeared on the large screens around the room. It showed a space station under attack. Enemy forces had taken control of the main corridors. The mission was simple: get from one end of the station to the other and disable the threat. "Standard combat exercise," explained Nexvor. "But we have made it more difficult than usual." "Much more difficult," added Grimtal with obvious pleasure. The aliens had spent hours the night before planning this test. They wanted to prove that humans were weak and slow. The scenario would require speed, strength, and advanced tactical thinking. They expected Juno to fail quickly and badly. The exercise began in a mock space station corridor. It was narrow and dark, with many turns and hiding places. Enemy targets would appear suddenly, requiring fast reactions and precise shooting. The aliens had also added obstacles that would test physical strength and endurance. "You have 20 minutes to complete the course," Brextar announced. "We will monitor your progress and offer helpful suggestions when you fail." Juno looked at the entrance to the mock station. He studied the layout on the screen for exactly 30 seconds. Then he nodded once and said, "Understood." The timer started. Juno disappeared into the training course. The aliens watched through cameras as their human teammate entered the first corridor. Enemy targets popped up immediately. Most soldiers would use their weapons to shoot each target. Instead, Juno did something unexpected. He threw his weapon aside. "What is he doing?" Kilara asked, her voice confused. On the screens, they watched Juno pick up pieces of metal debris from the floor. He moved quickly but quietly through the corridor. When targets appeared, he threw the metal pieces with deadly accuracy. Each piece hit the target's weak spots perfectly. "Lucky throws," Brextar muttered. "He cannot keep that up." But Juno did keep it up. He moved through the course like water flowing around rocks. When the path was blocked by heavy obstacles, he found ways around them instead of trying to move them with brute force. When enemy positions seemed impossible to reach, he used the station's maintenance shafts and air vents. "Those passages are too small for any reasonable being to use," Silwyn said, watching Juno squeeze through a space that looked barely wide enough for his shoulders. "Humans must be more flexible than our data suggested," Nexvor admitted grudgingly. The real surprise came when Juno reached what should have been an impossible section. The training course had been designed with a gap too wide to jump and walls too smooth to climb. The aliens expected him to give up here. Instead, Juno used his equipment in ways they had never seen before. He took apart his communication device and used the parts to create a simple grappling hook. He made rope from his uniform sleeves. In minutes he had crossed the impossible gap. How did he know to do that? Grimtal asked. "Human creativity," Kilara said slowly. "Perhaps we underestimated this aspect." The exercise continued. Each obstacle the aliens had designed to stop Juno only seemed to make him more inventive. When faced with locked doors, he found other ways through. When surrounded by multiple targets, He used the environment to defeat them instead of fighting directly. The aliens watched in growing amazement as Juno reached the final section of the course. Here they had placed their ultimate test, a combat scenario that required facing multiple enemies with superior firepower. They expected any human to be overwhelmed quickly. Juno studied the situation for a moment. Then he did something that left the aliens completely speechless. He began making noise. He banged on metal walls. He shouted in different voices. He created sounds that seemed to come from multiple directions. The training system's artificial enemies began responding to threats that did not exist. They fired at shadows and empty corridors while Juno moved unseen among them. Psychological warfare, Brextar said quietly. He is using their own programming against them. Within minutes, the enemy forces had exhausted their ammunition shooting at nothing. Juno walked calmly through their positions and completed the objective with time to spare. The timer showed 18 minutes and 47 seconds when Juno emerged from the training course. He was not even breathing hard. The aliens stared at him in silence. Everything they thought they knew about human capabilities had just been proven wrong. Acceptable performance, Juno said simply, picking up his equipment bag. Brextar's 4 arms hung at his sides. How did you know to use those techniques? Basic survival training, Juno replied. When you do not have advantages in strength or speed, you learn to use what you do have. Kalera's long neck twisted as she studied the human. What do humans have that we missed? Juno looked at each alien in turn. Adaptability. When the situation changes, we change with it. When the rules do not work, we find new rules. The training bay fell quiet. The aliens looked at their screens, reviewing what they had just witnessed. Their carefully designed test had been completed by methods none of them had considered possible. For the first time since Juno's arrival, no one was laughing at human capabilities. The emergency alarm screamed through Harmony's edge at exactly 0347 station time. Red lights flashed in every corridor as all off-duty personnel rushed to their stations. Juno woke instantly, already reaching for his equipment before his feet touched the floor. Years of military service had taught him that emergency alarms meant people were in danger. He arrived at the command center within minutes. The main screen showed a star map with a pulsing red dot at the edge of known space. Commander Thexel stood at the center of the room, his crystal skin glowing brighter than usual. Other officers moved quickly around him, gathering information and preparing reports. What is the situation? Juno asked as he joined Beta Squad near the tactical displays. Brextar pointed at the screen with one of his 4 massive arms. Mining colony on Taejun Prime has gone silent. Last transmission mentioned raiders attacking the main facility. Kalera's long neck extended toward the display. Not just any raiders. Intelligence confirms it is Vexmore's crew. The name made several aliens in the room make worried sounds. Juno had heard of Vexmore during his briefings. The raider captain was a Kraxan who had replaced most of his body with military-grade cybernetics. His crew specialized in taking hostages and selling them to slave markets across the galaxy. How many civilians? Juno asked. 237, replied Intelligence Officer Kexdal, a thin Zephyrian with multiple eyes. Men, women, children, and elderly. All trapped in the main colony complex. Commander Thexal activated a detailed view of Taejun Prime. The mining colony sat on a cliff above a poisonous lake. The facility was built into the rock face itself, with only one main entrance and several maintenance shafts. It looked like a fortress. Vexmore's ship, Death Shadow, is positioned directly above the colony, Kexdal continued. It carries enough firepower to destroy the entire facility if they feel threatened. Previous hostage situations involving Vexmore have ended badly, added another officer. He kills prisoners if rescue attempts take too long. Sometimes he kills them for entertainment. The room fell silent as everyone studied the tactical situation. The colony was in an almost impossible location to assault. The single entrance was heavily defended. The cliff face was too steep for normal climbing equipment. Any direct attack would likely result in the deaths of all hostages. Standard protocol suggests establishing a siege perimeter, Commander Thexal announced after consulting with his senior officers. We will surround the area and attempt negotiation. If that fails, we can wait for them to make mistakes. How long does a siege usually take? Juno asked. Several weeks, possibly months, Thexal replied. It depends on their supplies and willingness to cooperate. Juno looked at the display showing the colony layout. He studied the cliff face, the building structure, and the positions where Vexmore's forces were likely stationed. His dark eyes moved across every detail, memorizing distances and angles. Weeks might be too long, he said quietly. Brextar turned his massive head toward the human. What do you mean? Vexmore does not keep hostages for weeks, Juno explained. His pattern shows he either sells them quickly or eliminates them to avoid complications. 237 people is a large group to manage. He will want to resolve this situation soon. Commander Thexal's crystal skin flickered with interest. Do you have experience with this type of situation? Similar circumstances, Juno replied. Different enemy, same basic problem. Hostages in a defended position with limited time before execution. The aliens around the room exchanged glances. They were beginning to understand that Juno's service record might contain more real experience than they had initially believed. What would you suggest? Thexal asked. Juno pointed to the cliff face below the colony. The siege approach assumes we need to go through the main defenses. But there might be other options. Kilera studied the display more carefully. The rock face is completely vertical. No climbing equipment can handle that distance safely. Standard climbing equipment, Juno agreed. But there are other ways to climb. Silwyn, the Valari scout, made a quick calculation. Even if someone could scale that cliff, the facility has sensors that would detect any approach. They would kill hostages before an attacker could reach them. Unless the sensors were not working properly, Juno said. The aliens looked confused. Brextar crossed his forearms. How would you disable sensors from outside the facility? You would not disable them, Juno replied. You would make them see what you want them to see. Kexdal's multiple eyes blinked in sequence. Explain. Juno walked closer to the display. Sensors detect movement, heat, and electromagnetic signatures. But they are programmed to ignore certain things. Maintenance activities, environmental factors, normal colony operations. The colony is under attack, Thexal pointed out. There are no normal operations. There are always normal operations, Juno said. Life support systems, power generation, waste processing. The facility must continue these functions even during an attack, or everyone inside would die. The room became very quiet as the aliens began to understand what Juno was suggesting. You want to infiltrate using the facility's own infrastructure, Kilera said slowly. Environmental systems, power conduits, maintenance shafts, Juno confirmed. Places where sensors expect to detect activity. Brextar shook his massive head. Those passages are designed for automated systems and emergency repairs. They are too small and dangerous for most species to use. Juno looked at the Kraxan warrior calmly. Too small and dangerous for most species. Commander Thexal studied the human for a long moment. You believe you can infiltrate a heavily defended facility, disable or distract the enemy forces, and rescue over 200 hostages? I have seen worse odds, Juno replied simply. The aliens in the command center looked at each other uncertainly. This human was suggesting something that seemed impossible. But his performance and training had shown them that humans might be capable of things they did not understand. What would you need? Thexal asked finally. Juno began making a mental list. Basic climbing gear, simple explosives, communication equipment, and a good distraction. That is all. Sometimes less is more, Juno said. Complex equipment can fail. Simple tools work when you need them most. The assault on Tejun Prime began exactly at 0300 station time. 3 alien assault ships approached the colony from different directions, their weapons lighting up the dark space around the mining facility. Explosions bloomed against the rocky cliff face as Vexmore's defenders returned fire with everything they had. From his position in the command ship, Commander Thexal watched the tactical display. All units maintain attack pattern 7. Keep their attention focused on your positions. The alien forces were putting on a perfect show. Bright weapon flashes, loud explosions, and constant radio chatter made it seem like a full-scale assault was beginning. Inside the colony, Vexmore's crew would be running to defensive positions, watching the obvious threat approaching from 3 sides. What they could not see was the small figure moving through the darkness far below their position. Juno had dropped from his transport ship over an hour earlier, using a simple parachute to land on the narrow rocky ledge at the base of the cliff. The poisonous lake below him glowed with strange chemicals, casting weird shadows on the rock wall. The air smelled like metal and death. He looked up at the cliff face stretching above him. 500 meters of nearly vertical rock, with the colony built into the stone near the top. His alien teammates had called it impossible to climb. They were probably right by their standards. But Juno was not climbing by their standards. He began moving up the cliff using techniques that would have seemed impossible to anyone watching. His fingers found tiny cracks in the rock that looked too small to support any weight. His feet pressed against surfaces that appeared completely smooth. He moved slowly but steadily, testing each handhold before trusting it with his life. The climbing gear he carried was basic by galactic military standards. Simple rope, metal spikes, and tools that looked primitive compared to alien technology. But these simple tools worked exactly as expected. They did not fail when stressed. They did not require power sources or complex maintenance. After 2 hours of careful climbing, Juno reached the level where the colony's maintenance systems extended into the cliff face. Small openings in the rock led to pipes and tunnels that carried air, water, and power throughout the facility. These openings were designed for automated repair robots, not living beings. Juno squeezed into the first tunnel he found. The space was barely wide enough for his shoulders. Metal pipes ran along both sides, carrying superheated steam and electrical cables. The tunnel was filled with mechanical noise that would mask any sounds he made. It was also completely invisible to the colony's main sensor systems, which were designed to monitor larger spaces where intruders might move. He crawled through the maintenance network for over an hour, following maps he had memorized during the mission briefing. The tunnels connected to every major system in the colony. Power generators, air recycling plants, communication centers, and most importantly, the security control room. As he moved, Juno began his real work. He attached small devices to key systems throughout the facility. These were not advanced alien gadgets. They were simple electronic tools that could create specific effects when activated remotely. In the power distribution center, he placed a device that would cause lights to flicker in controlled patterns. In the communication hub, another device would generate false signals that would confuse sensor readings. In the air recycling system, he installed equipment that would create strange noises throughout the facility. Inside the colony, Vexmore was growing frustrated with the siege outside. His cybernetic enhancements allowed him to monitor multiple defensive positions simultaneously. His enhanced hearing picked up every explosion, every weapon discharge, every radio transmission from the attacking forces. "They are being too careful," he growled to his lieutenant, a scarred Kraxan named Torvek. "This siege could last for days. Should we begin executing hostages?" Torvek asked. "That usually makes attackers more aggressive." "Not yet," Vexmore replied. "Let them waste their time with standard tactics first." That was when the lights began flickering. At first it seemed random. A few lights in Corridor 7 went dark for several seconds, then came back on. Then lights in the main hall began flashing in a strange pattern. Within minutes, the lighting system throughout the facility was behaving erratically. "Engineering teams to all sectors," Vexmore ordered. "Fix the power grid immediately." But before his engineers could respond, other problems began appearing. The facility's communication system started picking up voices that seemed to come from empty rooms. Footsteps echoed through corridors where no one was walking. Air vents began making sounds like whispered conversations. Vexmore's crew became nervous. They were tough fighters, but the strange occurrences throughout the facility made them jumpy. Guards began shooting at shadows. Teams abandoned their posts to investigate noises that turned out to be nothing. "What is happening to this place?" Torvek demanded, his forearms twitching as another unexplained sound echoed through the main corridor. From his position in the maintenance tunnels, Juno activated more devices. He had spent years learning how to use psychology as a weapon. Fear was often more effective than bullets. Confusion could defeat an enemy faster than superior firepower. The raiders were now spread throughout the facility, chasing phantom threats and investigating false alarms. Their organized defensive positions had dissolved into chaos as small groups ran from room to room, trying to find threats that did not exist. Vexmore realized what was happening too late. "It is a diversion," he roared into his communicator. "Someone is inside the facility." All teams returned to hostage positions immediately. But his teams were scattered and confused. Some were in the wrong sections of the colony. Others were investigating noises that had stopped as soon as they arrived. The few who received his orders clearly were too far away to respond quickly. Juno emerged from the maintenance system directly behind the main hostage-holding area. 2 guards stood outside the sealed door, but they were looking the wrong direction, watching for threats from the main corridor. He moved silently across the small space between them. Neither guard realized what was happening until they were already unconscious. Juno accessed the door controls and looked inside. Over 200 civilians sat in the large room, guarded by only 4 raiders. The other guards had left their posts to chase the false threats he had created throughout the facility. This was exactly what he had planned for. The hostage rescue ended faster than anyone had expected. Juno moved through the holding area like a shadow, disabling guards before they could react or threaten civilians. The prisoners were freed and moved to safety through the same maintenance tunnels he had used to enter the facility. Vexmore discovered what had happened when he returned to the main hostage area. He found his guards unconscious and the room empty. His cybernetic enhancements began scanning for threats, processing data faster than any natural brain could manage. "Find them," he roared to his remaining crew. "Search every room, every corridor, every hiding place." But the search revealed nothing. The hostages had vanished completely. Worse, more of his crew were being found unconscious throughout the facility. Someone was systematically dismantling his operation, and he could not find them. The final confrontation happened in the colony's main power center. Vexmore had realized that all the strange occurrences were being controlled from this central location. His enhanced senses detected heat signatures and electromagnetic patterns that suggested someone was hiding among the massive power generators. He entered the room slowly, his 4 cybernetic arms ready for combat. His enhanced vision could see in complete darkness. His mechanical hearing could detect heartbeats from across the room. Every system in his body was designed for killing. "I know you are here," he called out. "Show yourself, coward. Face me in honorable combat." Juno stepped out from behind a power converter. He held only standard military equipment. No advanced weapons, no special armor, no cybernetic enhancements. Just a human soldier with basic gear. Vexmore laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "One small human? This is what caused all my problems." "Your problems are just beginning," Juno replied calmly. The fight that followed lasted exactly 47 seconds. Vexmore charged with impossible speed, his cybernetic limbs moving faster than normal eyes could track. His mechanical arms swung with enough force to crush steel. Any normal opponent would have been torn apart instantly. But Juno was not fighting like a normal opponent. Instead of trying to match Vexmore's speed and strength, he used them against the raider captain. When the cybernetic arms swung at him, he was no longer there. When Vexmore's enhanced legs carried him forward with tremendous speed, he found himself running into carefully positioned obstacles. Juno had studied the power center during his infiltration. He knew exactly where every pipe, cable, and support beam was located. As Vexmore charged around the room, Juno led him into a trap made from the facility's own infrastructure. Heavy power cables that Vexmore tore loose with his mechanical strength became tangled around his limbs. Steam pipes that he smashed in his rage filled the air with superheated vapor that confused his sensors. The very cybernetic enhancements that made him dangerous became the means of his capture. When the vapor cleared, Vexmore found himself wrapped in cables and chains, held in place by his own damaged cybernetics. The more he struggled, the tighter the trap became. "Impossible," he gasped. "No single being could defeat me in combat." "I did not defeat you in combat," Juno replied. "I let you defeat yourself." The rescue operation was completed within 6 hours of its start. All hostages were safely recovered. Vexmore and his crew were captured without a single civilian casualty. The alien assault teams had expected a long, difficult siege. Instead, they found themselves processing prisoners and preparing for departure. Back aboard Harmony's Edge, the mood in the debriefing room was very different from Juno's first day. The same aliens who had laughed at his service record now sat quietly, listening to every word of his mission report. Commander Thexal reviewed the tactical data on his screen. 237 hostages rescued. 15 enemy combatants captured. 0 civilian casualties. 0 friendly casualties. He looked up at Juno with obvious respect. "How did you accomplish this alone?" "I was not alone," Juno replied. "Your assault teams provided the distraction I needed. Without that, the infiltration would have been impossible." Brextar leaned forward in his chair. His 4 massive arms rested on the table in front of him. "Staff Sergeant, I owe you a serious apology. When you mentioned the defense of New Busan, I thought it was typical human exaggeration." "What actually happened there?" Kilera asked, her long neck curved with genuine interest. For the first time since joining the unit, Juno's expression softened slightly. He was quiet for a moment, remembering events from years past. 17 human soldiers held a supply depot against approximately 4,000 raiders. We had limited ammunition, no reinforcements, and food supplies for maybe 5 days. 17 against 4,000? Silwyn's voice showed amazement. "For how long?" 11 weeks, Juno replied simply. The room fell completely silent. Several aliens made calculations on their personal computers, trying to understand how such numbers were possible. The previous defenders lasted 6 hours before being overrun, Juno continued. Command expected us to hold for maybe 12 hours, long enough for evacuation ships to escape the system. But you held for 11 weeks, Commander Thexel said slowly. We adapted to the situation. Used what we had, found what we needed, refused to quit. When conventional tactics failed, we created new ones. When equipment broke, we improvised replacements. When food ran out, we learned to live on less. Brextar shook his massive head in disbelief. How is such endurance possible? Humans have one advantage that other species sometimes underestimate, Juno explained. When we decide something must be done, we find a way to do it. We do not accept that any situation is truly hopeless. Commander Thexel stood and walked to the front of the room. His crystal skin glowed with formal respect. Staff Sergeant Kim Juno, I would like to offer you a position as senior training instructor. Our multi-species units would benefit greatly from learning human tactical approaches. Juno considered the offer carefully. I would be honored to share what I know, Commander. Though I should warn you that what we call human myths and legends are usually just regular Tuesday activities for most human soldiers. Around the room, alien officers began accessing their databases, cross-referencing human battle reports with official military records. They were beginning to understand that human mythology was actually a collection of historical documents that their own systems had failed to properly evaluate. The aliens had learned something important about their human colleagues. They did not win through superior technology or overwhelming force. They won by refusing to accept defeat and finding solutions in places others never thought to look. What seemed impossible to other species was simply another problem to solve for humans. From that day forward, when alien soldiers heard stories about human military achievements, they listened with respect instead of laughter. They had learned that human legends were usually just understatements of what actually happened.